Hello there, dear friends, and welcome once again to the Relaxed Fantasy Review. On this channel, we spend our time looking at fantasy of all sorts, from books to movies to video games, and applying the characters within into the tabletop game Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition. Today, though, we're going to be looking at a core mechanic of D&D itself. Specifically, we're going to be looking at one of the most legendary races to ever grace the D&D table. We're looking at the Elves. The Elves are a staple of fantasy and have been in fantastical stories and books for a long, long time. Those magical, slender humanoids from the fairy worlds and the worlds beyond. But how do they present themselves in the D&D world? Let's have a look-see at the ways elves can present themselves. Now, elves, as a standard ability score increase, all get a +2 to their dexterity. Dexterity is one of the best ability score increases in the whole game, permeating combat, defense, agility, and lots of really, really important skills. This is a 10 out of 10 to have as your +2. Their size is medium, so they don't have any of the limitations of some of the smaller races, so 10 out of 10 for their size. Their speed is 30 feet. This is pretty standard, so 9 out of 10 there. No buff, but no weakness either. And they have the all-important dark vision. Out to 60 feet, elves can see in dim light as if it were bright light, and no light as if it were dim light. 10 out of 10. Every creature that doesn't have dark vision wishes they did. Elves also naturally get proficiency in the perception skill. The perception skill is definitely one of the most useful skills in the game, and just to get it for free is really, really handy. 9 out of 10 for that one. They also have a power called Fey Ancestry, since, according to the lore of D&D, elves came from the Fey. This gives them advantage against any charm effect and makes them completely immune to any sleep effect. Now, sleep doesn't come up super often, but charm actually comes up more often than you might think. And so having Fey Ancestry definitely helps out whenever this is something that could cripple the party. 9 out of 10. Then one of their most unique powers, the Trance Ability. The Trance Ability basically states that elves don't need to sleep. Just like they're immune to sleep magic, they also don't need to sleep normally just to get their long rest. Instead, they enter a semi-conscious meditation state, where they just have to remain motionless for 4 hours, and they get the benefit of their long rest. This can be handy if you need someone to be semi-conscious, looking for danger, or if you just don't have the time for a long rest, an elf might be able to squeeze theirs in. This is a decent power, and although it doesn't really come up because most of the time you're going to just have a long rest available for the party anyway, it's nice in specific occasions. I give this an 8 out of 10 for the elves. Finally, elves speak Common and Elvish. Having 2 languages and 2 of the most commonly spoken languages in the whole game, no complaints there, 9 out of 10. But then come the 3 basic sub-races of the elves, what you find in the player's handbook anyway. The High Elves, the Wood Elves, and the Dark Elves. We'll go through each of them individually. Now, High Elves get a +1 to their intelligence as their second ability score increase. Intelligence is one of the least useful stats in the game. Only really wizards and studious people need to have high intelligence. It's very often a dump stat. So only a 5 out of 10 on that one. Not a whole lot of buff there. Elves also, High Elves, also get elf weapon training. This gives them proficiency in the long sword, the short sword, the long bow, and the short bow. Basically giving them, no matter what their class, the ability to use some pretty cool weaponry. Having extra weapons is nice, especially if you're going to play a spellcasting character, and High Elves often do. I give this an 8 out of 10 for its ability. Basically, anyone who doesn't have proficiency in these could take a feat to get this, or just be an elf, and they get it for free. They also get a cantrip, a free cantrip, no matter what class they are. It comes from the wizard spell list, and this is great. It provides ranged attack options for non-spellcasters to have as a cantrip. It can provide utility and all sorts of social abilities. Just a free cantrip is awesome, especially when it comes from the wizard spell list, which is the most versatile one in the whole game. You can't go wrong here. This is a 10 out of 10 thing, especially if you're not a spellcaster. If you're a rogue or a fighter or a barbarian, just having a cantrip is phenomenal. Finally, they get an extra language. You can't really complain with that one. It buffs them up socially. They already have Common and Elvish, so having a third one is pretty good. That's a 10 out of 10 for sure. The total for the High Elf, when you crunch all the numbers, is 9 out of 10. The High Elf is a phenomenal pick for pretty much anybody in almost any situation, other than like really, really tanky characters. If you're wearing anything except heavy armor, and if you're basically anything except a frontline combatant, an elf would be a great pick. And even then, it's not too bad. But then we get the Wood Elves, the next option. They get their +1 to their wisdom, not their intelligence. And wisdom is a great skill to have your +1 in. 6 out of 10, because it's still just a +1, not a +2, but I'm still going to give it the thumbs up for that. They also get the same elf weapon training, long sword, short sword, longbow, short bow. Again, helping them even out their weapons if they are a low weapon class, so 8 out of 10, same as before. But then they get the Fleet of Foot power. The Fleet of Foot power increases their speed to 35 feet, giving them that tiny bit of extra maneuverability over other elves, and other races in general. Most races don't move that fast. 10 out of 10, because maneuverability is one of the key things no matter what class you're playing. And then finally, Mask of the Wild. All creatures have the ability to hide when they're heavily obscured or totally covered, but Wood Elves get the ability to attempt to hide when only lightly obscured, as long as it's by natural things. Falling snow, leaves, very light brush and foliage. Wood Elves are very good at hiding. And even though hiding isn't always applicable, it's still really handy in a lot of situations, so I give that an 8 out of 10. And Wood Elves total up to 9 out of 10 as well, just like their High Elf brethren. We're looking pretty good so far. Then we have Dark Elves, the most controversial of the three. They get their +1 to Charisma. This is really, really good. I give that an 8 out of 10. Charisma is absolutely one of the best stats in the game. They also have Superior Dark Vision. Superior Dark Vision means that they can actually see 120 feet in darkness. So yeah, 10 out of 10. Doubling their vision in dark areas means that they'll see you before you see them. But they have a weakness, unfortunately. Their weakness is sunlight sensitivity. Sunlight sensitivity means that if they are in broad daylight, they have disadvantage on perception checks, and disadvantage on attacks. Permanently. As long as they're in sunlight, they are struggling. Now, a lot of the time you can get around this, hiding in the shadow of trees, hiding in buildings, hiding in alleyways. There's a lot of ways to get around the sun. But if you're out in an open field, or if you're, on the main roads or something like that, it can really be a detriment to be a dark elf. So this is a 1 out of 10. It is possibly the worst weakness that is built into a race. And there's nothing good about it. Like, it just is a detriment, and is one of the main reasons people shouldn't play Dark Elves if they're not going to be in a place they can be in the shade. But they do have another couple buffs. The Drow Magic buff gives them a couple other free spells. They get the Dancing Lights cantrip. At 3rd level, they can cast Fairy Fire, and at 5th level, they can cast Darkness. And they can do this once per rest, without being a spellcaster otherwise. Fairy Fire, one of the best first level spells out there. And Darkness, very handy. Dark Elves are very comfortable in the dark. So, the Drow magic power, 10 out of 10. More spells, and yeah, good ones at that. And then finally, they get Drow weapon training, different than the other weapon training. They get proficiency in hand crossbows, short swords, and rapiers, dex-based weapons, and finesse weapons. These weapons actually stand out as being some of the best options for rogues and rangers and dex-based fighters. It's one less weapon than the other elf weapon training, but I think that the fact that they're finesse weapons across the board just makes up for it. So 8 out of 10 for that as well. And it turns out, even with their sunlight sensitivity, dark elves are still 9 out of 10. You just gotta watch out for that sunlight. Overall, elves are 9 out of 10. They're one of the best races in the game. Their dark vision, their resistances to specific magics, their extra magic, their extra weapons, their special abilities, depending on which race you are. Elves just, they're well known and well loved for a reason. They can fit almost any build. They can do lots of extra stuff that other races can't. And in general, elves are a top tier pick for the game of D&D. This has been the Relaxed Fantasy Review. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe down below, and keep your eyes open for more racial reviews coming soon. Have a good one, my friends.